This old guy DIY video has to do with replacing the fuel lines on a Husqvarna 335R brush cutter. So this thing's about 10 years old. I was using it, it was working fine, then it just shut off. So when I looked, I saw that one of the fuel lines that goes into here had actually broken off. And on the other end of the line was the filter and this thing. So I bought a little kit that includes 3 types of lines, 3 different sizes, some filters, and some of the little bulbs that you press to apply pressure to the fuel system. And now I'm going to replace the lines that are here. So I just held the yellow tubing up against the stuff that's on this Husqvarna. I have one that looks very similar. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the lines that are on here, just one at a time, and replace them. And then I'll replace this broken line, put it all together, see if it goes. And to remove it, I just grabbed a tool that had the right tip to fit these screws that hold this big housing to the carburetor. So I took those 2 off that were under the air filter, and then I removed the screws that held this housing to the back. And basically I ended up with this little pile of screws. This unit comes off nice and clean as one unit. Now all I'm going to do is replace the tubing one at a time, put it back together, and see if it fires up and runs as it has for the last 10 years. Now I removed this first piece of tubing, and I noted that it came from the left port on the back of that bulb, wrapped around, and went to this little fitting. So I just held the yellow tubing up next to the old one. I cut a piece the same length and put it in place. So that was the first one. Now the second piece runs from here over to that broken line that was in the fuel tank. So I cut a piece that's the right length. I inserted it into the fuel tank first. I'll grab that with the needle nose, put a filter back on it, and then stick that into the tank. Now I have this thing fed into the tank and the other end comes out, so I can put the fuel filter on it, and then I'll drop it down in the tank where it belongs. Now I put a new filter on the line, and I replaced the O-ring that was on the old filter. There's the old filter. And now I'll just pull this end out, seat the filter here in the bottom of the fuel tank. The third line goes from the right hand fitting on that little bulb into the tank. So I put it on here long first. I'll cut it off now and feed it in. When putting this unit back together, I found it easiest to take the tank, put it in place, and then I came in here and put these 3 screws in first, and then I put the little screw on for that heat shield, and now I have this thing on nice and firmly. So I'm going to bring the carburetor assembly up here, make my final attachments. When reinstalling the carburetor, if the gasket has come off, be sure you look at that. You can see the little witness marks here on the bottom. The witness marks align with this little area down here. So just make sure that you have the gasket returned to the same orientation it was when it came off. Now I have all the lines hooked up where they belong, and it's just a matter of tucking them into the tank and remounting the carburetor, and we should be in action here shortly. Now I reattached the throttle linkage over here. I have the gasket in the proper orientation, and I have the 2 long bolts that go from the carburetor into the block here in position. So now it's just a matter of rotating this thing up, starting the bolts by hand and tightening them down with the screwdriver. So from an alignment standpoint, everything pulled in nicely. I just did these 2 bolts first. Make sure that the little air line is lined up here. And then there was a 3rd bolt here. And now I'll just put the gasket and air filter housing on, and I'll be ready to see if it starts. But I was encouraged. Now when I pump the bulb here, you can see that it's drawing up fuel. And when I open the cap, I can see that it's discharging the excess fuel into the tank. So it's working as it should. When this thing stopped running, I could pump the bulb and nothing happened as far as fuel flow. So that's how I knew that I had a shot line. Normally an air filter goes right here, but mine is disintegrated over the years of use, so I'll buy a new one after I get this thing running. When I disassembled this, I didn't pay attention to see these two little holes that have to go beneath the recoil starter for this thing to slide down into place. So now I'll remove these two screws on the back, drop this into place, and tighten them up again. Now I have everything buttoned up, back together. It's time to see if it starts. Yes, it's starting the way it should. Sounds like it's happy. We'll call this line replacement a success. Have a great day.